Picture this for a second. I'm standing in a movie theater lobby, the smell of popcorn in the air, lights low, previews already rolling in my head. I'm not there to make a big financial decision. I'm not there to spend real money. I'm just there to watch a movie. And like most people, I tell myself the same harmless lie. I'll just get the small popcorn. I don't need the big one. I don't need the extra calories. And I definitely don't need to overpay for corn. That's the plan. That's always the plan. But then I look up at the menu board, and something quietly shifts. The small is $6. That already feels expensive, but fine. It's the movies. Then my eyes drift just a little to the right. The large is $8. And sitting right in between them is the medium, priced so close to the large that my brain immediately starts whispering, well, that would be stupid not to upgrade. This is the moment where most people think they're being smart. This is the moment where money quietly starts leaving your life. Because you didn't walk in planning to spend $8. You walked in planning to spend $6. And yet, somehow, you feel proud walking away with the large. I've watched this scene play out for decades. Not just in movie theaters. In lives. What's dangerous about that moment isn't the popcorn. It's the feeling. You don't feel reckless. You don't feel irresponsible. You feel clever. You feel like someone who understands value. Your brain does a quick comparison, runs a little math, and hands you a quiet reward. See? You're not like other people. You're thinking ahead. And that feeling is exactly what makes this trap work. Because you're no longer asking, do I actually want this? You're asking a completely different question. Which option makes me feel least stupid? That shift happens fast, almost invisibly. You're not chasing more popcorn. You're chasing the relief of knowing you didn't make the wrong choice. I've seen this pattern repeat itself in 1,000 places, with 1,000 people, across decades of watching how money really moves. Most financial damage doesn't come from bad intentions. It comes from good intentions paired with the wrong question. People don't overspend because they're careless. They overspend because they're trying to be rational inside a system designed to reward comparison, not restraint. And once your brain locks onto comparison, the original plan you walked in with quietly disappears. You don't even notice it's gone. That's how this starts. Softly, comfortably, with a decision that feels smart. Here's the part most people don't like hearing. You didn't get a deal. You got played. That middle option on the board was never meant to be sold. It wasn't put there for your benefit. It exists for one reason only: to change how your brain compares. That medium popcorn isn't a product. It's a psychological tool. Its job is to make the small feel inadequate and the large feel reasonable. Without it, you'd look at $6 versus $8 and think, I'll save $2. But once the medium appears, your brain stops thinking in absolute dollars and starts thinking in relative value. 50 cents more suddenly feels insignificant, even though you just increased your spending by more than 30% from what you planned. That's not logic. That's manipulation dressed up as math. And the most effective part of this trick is that no one has to say a word. No one pressures you. No one upsells you. You upsell yourself. You walk away convinced you made a smart, independent decision, when in reality, the decision was quietly guided before you ever reached the counter. I've watched people blame themselves for this for years, calling it weakness or poor discipline. But this isn't about willpower. It's about a system that understands your brain better than you do. And once you see that, the popcorn stops being the story. It becomes the warning sign. And that's where this stops being about a snack at the movies and starts being about your entire financial life. Because the popcorn isn't the problem, the pattern is. Once you recognize it, you start seeing it everywhere. Coffee shops do it, subscription services do it, tech companies do it with storage tiers and feature ladders. There's always one option that feels uncomfortably limited, one option that feels slightly painful, and one option that suddenly feels reasonable by comparison. You don't buy more because you need more. You buy more because the alternative makes you feel like you're settling. That emotional discomfort is intentional. Marketers understand that humans are terrible at judging value in isolation. We can't tell if something is expensive or cheap unless it's sitting next to something else, so they never let you decide in a vacuum. They surround your decision with carefully designed comparisons, knowing your brain will do the rest. And it works not because you're bad with money, but because you're human. Every time you say, "It's only a little more," you're not making a one-time choice. You're reinforcing a habit of stretching, upgrading, justifying. $1 here, $5 there. Nothing that feels dangerous in the moment. But money doesn't disappear in dramatic collapses for most people. It disappears quietly, through dozens of decisions that felt harmless at the time. And that's why this trap is so effective. It doesn't feel like a mistake. It feels like common sense. And here's where the consequences quietly get serious. Because this same pattern doesn't stop at coffee cups or phone storage. It follows you into the biggest decisions of your life. I've watched it happen with apartments, with cars, with houses people swear they can comfortably afford. You walk in with a number in your head, a budget, a limit, something you promised yourself you wouldn't cross. Then the comparisons begin. One place feels cramped, another feels outdated. Another is just a little more per month, but suddenly feels like the right choice. Notice how the question changes. You stop asking, "Can I afford this?" and start asking, "Which one is the better deal?" Those are not the same question, and confusing them is how people lock themselves into years of financial pressure. I've seen families stretch for a car payment because the upgrade was only $50 more a month. I've seen buyers justify a higher mortgage because the house next door made it look reasonable. That's not growth. That's escalation disguised as logic. Once you accept a higher reference point, everything below it starts to feel cheap, even when it's still expensive. And the market knows this. It shows you the worst option first, so the mediocre one feels safe, then slips in the slightly better option, so you feel smart for stretching. That's how budgets quietly break. Not in one reckless leap, but in a series of small, reasonable steps that all point in the same direction. Up. Always up. I want to slow this down for a moment, because this isn't something I'm saying from the outside. I fell into this trap too. I used to think choosing the better version was a sign of discipline, of maturity, of knowing how money works. I told myself I was investing in quality, in convenience, in future-proofing my life. And for a while, that story felt good. My choices sounded smart when I explained them out loud, but when I stopped listening to the explanations and started looking at the numbers, something didn't line up. My income had gone up over the years, but so had my stress. My house was nicer, my car was newer, my gadgets were better. Yet my sense of financial breathing room never arrived. That's when it clicked. I wasn't being reckless. I was being gently, consistently nudged into spending just a little more than I needed to, over and over again. Not enough to cause panic, just enough to keep me busy, chasing comfort instead of building freedom. And once I saw that pattern in my own life, I couldn't unsee it anywhere else. The real shift didn't happen when I learned more about money. It happened when I learned to ask a better question. For most of my life, I was trained just like everyone else to compare. Bigger versus smaller, premium versus basic, best value versus worst value. And as long as I stayed inside that comparison game, I kept losing. Quietly. Consistently. The escape isn't willpower, it's perspective. The moment you step back and ask, if this were the only option on the table, would I still buy it? Everything changes, because comparison disappears. Pressure disappears. What's left is truth. Then there's the second question, the uncomfortable one. Am I buying this because I need it, or because I'm afraid of feeling like I made the wrong choice? That fear of regret, of missing out, of being the person who didn't optimize is what drains most budgets. And finally, the question that protects your future more than any spreadsheet ever will. Am I paying for something I won't actually use? You can't deposit value per dollar into a savings account. You can only deposit money you didn't spend. Once I started filtering decisions through those questions, spending didn't feel restrictive. It felt quiet. And quiet, in financial life, is powerful. Here's what most people never realize. Choosing less isn't about deprivation. It's about control. When you order the small popcorn, drive the base model, or skip the upgrade you don't need, you're not falling behind. You're stepping out of a game that was designed to keep you spending. And the moment you do that, something subtle but important happens. Your money stops feeling tight. Not because you suddenly earn more, but because fewer decisions are quietly leaking cash from your life. Freedom doesn't come from finding the best deal. It comes from refusing to be pushed into deals you never planned to make. I've watched people chase value their entire lives and still feel broke, anxious, and stretched thin. And I've watched others live calmly, comfortably, simply because they learned when to stop comparing. This channel isn't here to teach you how to make more money. It's here to help you stop losing the money you already have. If this made you notice how often menus, tiers, and upgrades have been steering your decisions, share it with someone who always orders the biggest size. And next time you're standing at the counter, remember this: the smartest financial move is often the quiet one. Let me leave you with one last thought, because this is where everything comes together. Most people think money problems come from not earning enough. After a lifetime of watching how people actually live, I can tell you that's rarely the real issue. The real problem is that we keep letting tiny decisions rewrite our financial boundaries without us noticing. We don't lose money in dramatic mistakes. We lose it by saying, sure, one upgrade at a time. That's how stress sneaks in. That's how freedom quietly slips away. You don't need to be extreme. You don't need to live small. You just need to stop letting comparison decide for you. Value doesn't make you rich. Money you keep does. And the people who end up calm around money aren't the ones who optimized every purchase. They're the ones who learned when to stop. This is the perspective I share as Grandma Investor, not because I'm smarter than anyone else, but because I've seen what happens when people never question the menu. If you remember nothing else, remember this: the moment you stop upgrading, you start keeping. And if this idea feels uncomfortable, that's actually a good sign. Discomfort is what shows you where the habit lives. The systems around you are counting on the fact that you'll stay busy, distracted, and slightly rushed, so you never pause long enough to notice how often you're being nudged upward. Not upward in life, upward in spending. I'm not asking you to fight the system every day. That's exhausting. I'm asking you to step out of it once in a while. To notice when a decision suddenly feels urgent, when a small upgrade feels emotionally necessary, when the phrase, "it's only a little more," slips into your head without permission. That's your cue. That's the moment to slow down. Because money doesn't reward speed. It rewards awareness. And awareness is something no algorithm, no pricing tier, no cleverly designed menu can take from you unless you hand it over. The quietest people around money are usually the strongest ones. They're not winning louder, they're just losing less.